Hello, my name is Pádraig Ó Tuama, and I am delighted to be here with the poet Homero Aridjis.
Yes.
George McWhirter has been awarded the 2024 Griffin Poetry Prize for his translation of Homero's work, Self-Portrait in the Zone of Silence, published by New Directions. Homero, I'm congratulating you and congratulating your translator all at once.
Thank you so much. I am very grateful.
Yeah.
Yes.
I read years ago that you said that when somebody began to translate you into English, it was like you began to experience a second life. Would you still feel like that?
Yes, because it's the poems are traveling. Then it's very nice for a poet to see the poetry translated into English, especially because it's very universal, and you can be read by any people in different languages.
I mean, Spanish is such a world language as well as English, of course.
Yes.
You and George have had such a long collaboration over 25 years, and the prize goes to him for the translation to English of your work. But I'm curious about the collaboration between the two of you, in the sense of it's an intimate connection for someone to translate poems that come from the heart, no matter what their topic.
No, it's very deep, the relationship, because since I met George, we became friends, and also it's like a compenetration of poetry that it's not just somebody translating your poetry and it's all. But George is a friend, and I feel feel him very close in the poetry. I feel his
Um,
presence.
So yeah, I just interviewed him just a short while ago, and he mentioned that there was one time when he maintained some alliteration of the letter V in a translation, and you said, no, don't don't do that so perfectly. It's an interesting relationship, therefore, that you have between the artist and the translator, that you have some exchange back and forth. It isn't just one formal translation. Somehow it's a conversation, a living translation almost.
No, I feel George very close because it's like it's like a novel in another language. It's not any translator, but it's a close friend, and I feel very comfortable, very safe to be
Yeah.
translated by him.
I feel like poets say that they are never completely in control of their own poetry, even when they're writing in their own mother tongue. And you're not completely in control of your own poetry because it's coming from somewhere else. And then you're doubly not in control of your own poetry when it's being translated into another language. Um, what is your experience of control or mystery or the lack of control like when it comes to, first of all, when you write in Spanish?
Well, it's a very special impression because you feel like the poem is a secret double uh, language for you. It's not
Mm,
that is your experiment that your poem is having a second life, and that's
yeah.
very interesting in the translation. Once you are translated into another language, you feel like you abandon the control of your poems. They are
Okay.
traveling in other languages, and people from different countries can read you in a very
Mm.
different way.
You've done some translation yourself. You translated some of Dante's Inferno and
Yes,
William Blake. And I heard you say that when you translate, you're looking for the emotion, not just the strict interpretation of language, but for you, it's the feeling. Could you talk
yes.
about that? I found that such an interesting point.
Well, for example, when I began to read Dante in Italian, very close language to Spanish, but you discover that Dante is very close to you. It's
Mm,
strange, because probably it's the Italian that is a language like very close to Spanish. But Dante for me has been a point of reference to poetry
mm,
because I began to read Dante before I can read Italian, and about the sound of Dante's poetry, il mezzo del camino de nuestra vida, etc., was very close. And had a lot of very esoteric, mysterious sounds.
And is feeling contained in those sounds?
Yes, because the great poetry sometimes has secret meanings or had different meanings beyond the words. And I feel it very close to me. Not only the sound of his poetry was it was mysterious and was very enigmatic at the same time.
And what are some of the secret meanings of Dante?
Yes, but I prefer not to read because it's always, every time I read Dante, it's different because I have read Dante in different stages of my life. When I was just very young, and it was very like almost sibilant sounds, the beginning of the Commedia.
Yeah. I'm interested in the relationship with Dante because, of course, the Inferno starts off with midway through life. And
Yes.
your collection, the translation of which has won the Griffin Prize for 2024, is self-portrait in the zone of silence. And you've written these self-portraits over 25 years. What have you noticed about the passage from midlife into older life as you look at this collection of poetry?
Well, it's always different. You discover that you are yourself at any age, but always there is something mysterious in your own age, and especially when you are writing poetry. There were I was writing poetry when I was very young, almost a teenager, and then poetry has been for me like very enigmatic, mysterious language, like a second language, a second life, and it's very mysterious how you can write poetry, and especially when I was reading in Italian, that is not my language, that had another meaning, almost a sibilant meaning, certain Italian words, especially coming from Dante. Dante is also a legendary poet, and it's always, you can read it in different moments in your life.
You did begin writing poetry very young. Can you recall what the topics of your early poems were, even as a teenager?
Yes, were love poems, and
Oh,
with love
of course.
reference. Yes, love is the door of entrance to poetry. Love, and you feel it in different ways, even as sometimes rhetorical, sometimes very deep. You feel yourself in these experiences, but also it's like great thing in poetry, love. Yeah.
Another thing that happened to you as a young boy is you accidentally shot yourself. You've
Yes.
written about that in your poem, Self-Portrait
Yeah.
with Hands. I wonder if you could read that poem in Spanish and in English, and then we could talk a little bit about what you're exploring in that poem. It's page
Yes.
86.
Yes. Autorretrato con manos. Self-portrait with hands. Well, the hands have been very important for me as a poetic reference because when I had this accident, I suffered, I lost fingers. And then when I was 11, and it was very important traumatic experience to have your hand almost mutilated. And then was like, I feel like different.
Of
My
course.
own body and losing my 3 fingers, not the whole fingers, but parts of the fingers. It was like marked in my own body, and I had to become used to have these hands and trying to see that it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Then sometimes you don't know what to do with your own hands when you are
mm,
teenagers, because I was playing football, I was playing with other boys, then you have the confrontation with girls, looking at your hands, then it's a strange thing that you had a mark in your own body. And for me, it was very special, this experience, because it was experience of a life and changed my life completely. It
yeah,
was like, I remember the day of the accident all the time. It's like along the years, because I was 10 and now I am a man in his 80s, then it has been a long life experience. And
mm,
it's, especially was very traumatic when I was a teenager and a young
of
man,
course.
because
Yeah,
you have the experience to confront with women, girls, and people, friends, etc. Wherever you go, you have like
mm,
a mark in your own body.
yeah, and grief as well, and an experience of death almost, or near
Exactly,
death. Yeah.
exactly. Then this was a terrible experience, because it was like I fell when I had the operation, of almost near death experience, and that
Mm,
has been a presence along my life, even at
mm,
this age, even long time ago. My accident is always present. It's
mm,
strange, and I feel like
yeah.
a survivor at any age. It's
Mm,
strange.
mm. I wonder if you could read the poem
Yes,
in Spanish
autorretrato,
and in English. It'd be lovely to hear it in both languages.
autorretrato con manos. La mano izquierda, sana, furiosa, pasa los dedos sobre la mano derecha, envuelta en gasas y en vendas. Su hermana está herida. Un disparo le ha violado las falangetas y su niñez ha caído en la distancia. Sobreviviente de un accidente, él tiembla más que nunca sus manos, animales prensibles de un mismo cuerpo. Perdón. En el espacio hospitalario se reconocen como gemelas de la misma gracia y desgracia. Sentado el niño que tuvo una experiencia cercana a la muerte, convaleciente, se sienta en un banco cerca de la puerta verde por la que sacan a los muertos, mientras ve a sus manos reconocerse como si no hubiese pasado nada. This poem is very autobiographical. And when I
Mm,
was in the hospital, I was taken out to the hall to take the zone, and I was just very fragile. And then when you see the movement in the hospital, then you feel more the presence of death, because you ask about these doors. There was this green door that were the door where the dead were taken away. Then for you it's very impressive to see
mm,
this, like you see the door almost like an abyss, like a
mm,
mouth, very sinister. But this is close the door, but you don't want
mm,
to see the door open, because it's bad news for yourself. And that was very
yeah.
strange, the meaning of this green door.
Mm. I wonder, could you read it in English? And then I've got a couple of
Yes,
quick questions about it.
yes. Her portrait with hands, the healthy, curious left hand runs his fingers over the right hand, so that the gauze and bandages. A sibling is wounded. A shot has ripped through the phalanx bones, and his childhood has fallen into the distance. Survived of an accident, he shivers. More than ever, his hands, pencil animals of one and the same body. In the hospital space, recognize each other as twins of the same blighting and blessing. The boy who had a near-death experience, seated, recovering on a bench, stays sitting by the green door through which they take out the dead, while he sees his sons acknowledging one another as if nothing happened.
And how many years after this happened did you write this particular poem? I'm sure you wrote many versions of it, but how?
Well, has been many years after, because it's
Mm,
like strange when I write about this moment. It's like it was yesterday. It's strange,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like a recurrent experience, and the feeling of the
mm,
poem is very close. It's
mm.
very autobiographical, but not in a rhetorical way, but
No,
almost
no,
I think that as I'm very close to me still now.
yeah. It is a frightening image of that boy being by those doors, almost like he's watching the doors of life and death. I mean, he is watching the doors of life and death, but
Yes,
we so many people speak about the tunnel of death or passing
yes,
through that door when they speak about death experiences, and there you are literally having that at the age of 10, and then in a certain sense not knowing how to live with that for a long time.
exactly.
How do any of us know how to live with that?
No, and I was when I arrived to this hospital, I was I had the accident in my village when I was 10 years old, but the transportation from the village to the hospital took like 8 hours because
Oh,
it was not hospitals around close to my
mm,
village. Then my
mm,
father took me in a taxi, a local taxi, and he arrived to looking for a local doctor, but the local doctor was not there. I was very lucky that he was not
it's a
there.
long day, yeah.
It's then had
I'm
to go.
struck by the I'm struck by the form of the poem, Homero.
Yes,
It's in
yes,
6 stanzas, and each stanza has 3 lines, and the
yes,
lines are of varying length, both in Spanish and in English. And when you speak about having injured 3 fingers of your hand, and
yes,
then we have each of these stanzas with 3 fingers each of varying lengths,
yes,
I was interested in the way in which the poem itself is a visual reflection as well
yes,
as an emotional reflection on
yes.
the experience.
Well, is the experience of the accident and the
Mm,
experience, near-death experience. Then for me,
mm,
this poem is very autobiographical in a way that I can explain. But this
yeah,
comes from inside and comes from this experience. And it's strange, this kind of experiences that now I am 83. And then it's like the accident was yesterday. And the experience
mm,
of near-death experiences was yesterday. So
yeah.
it was not a rhetorical poem, was very autobiographical
Yeah,
in a way
yeah.
that, but also autobiographical in a recurring way, because
Mm,
came back always in different ways to
yeah, of
express
course.
itself, this experience.
Mm.
Yes,
Elsewhere in this collection of poetry, translated into English, of course, I don't have the Spanish. You talk about a poem being like a door, and then also that poetry calls. It seems that there is a belief in you of
yes,
some kind of vocation of poetry,
yes,
that it has something to say. Maybe
yes.
mysterious, you've mentioned that word a few times, but I'm interested to hear you say a little bit more, and maybe even read one or two of those very short poems. But tell me what it is. What is it that the purpose of poetry has been in your life?
It has been like a living experience. Always poetry has the side of rhetoric, is, reading the other poems, but for me has been a living experience, and
Mm,
especially my poems, because were had this kind of autobiographical, but a recurrent autobiography, because never is completely explained. My accident
yeah.
for myself has been
No.
something I came back always. Now I am
Yeah.
83, and I am coming back to this moment like it was
Mm,
yesterday. And I had the
yeah.
experience of the accident, the transportation, not taxi, in a very difficult road. No, was not, was in jumping and I was in the back seat with my father and looking for a doctor. And the
Mm,
doctor, we looked for first, it was in a village, but the doctor was not there. Then we had to go to another village, and my father was transporting me, wanted, and then was the presence of my father was extraordinary, and my mother in these moments, because they were like orphans like me,
Yeah.
because looking for a doctor, a hospital, and it was an area there were no doctors, no
Yeah.
hospitals.
Your father was from Greece, is that right?
Yes, yes.
What part of Greece?
Yeah, well, he was coming from the area of Smyrna, because
Mm.
he was fighting against the Turks in
Mm-hmm.
the 22, and he was an exiled man, and he had the experience of death
Mm.
very strong in his life, because
Yeah.
his family was many of his family people were killed, and then he was a survivor, but he was
Mm.
very serene man, and he was very calm in the presence of my accident, and
Mm.
he had a strong will to take care of myself, and
Yeah.
was this travel in a taxi, mm, a very casual taxi. It was not the best transportation. He
Mm.
had this obsession or purpose to take me to a hospital and to save my life.
Yeah. Um, when I spoke with George McWhirter, the
Yeah.
translator of this book into English, he was saying that his father too had experience of war, and
Yes.
that there seems to be, while the two of you come from such different places,
Yes.
um, that nonetheless there are shared experiences that you have of
Yes.
children from adults who knew about tension
Yes.
and war.
Yes.
Um, do you find that shared experience between you as the poet and your translator helps because there can be a sensitivity, or is it all there in the language and it doesn't matter if there's shared experience between the poet and the translator?
I felt yours very close,
Mm.
almost as a friend, as a translator, because I felt his sympathy, not only as a human person, but also as to poetry. He felt the
Hmm.
poetry. That was
Yeah.
very important for a translator, because there are many translations that are very external, that the people
Mm.
make the translation mechanically, but not
Yeah.
feel the poem. He was always feeling the poem, and that
Yeah.
George translation very close to me.
And feeling seems to be of absolute importance for you in your poetry, the feeling of the language as well as the message of the language.
Yes, and
Your
also
your poetry
yes, tell me. Yes,
Your poetry concerns itself with the world, the natural world,
yes,
landscape, action. Sometimes they're like small movies. You can
yes,
see so much about what's going on. Our eye is directed toward objects, but so you point toward natural events and places and people and character. But you also push through that into speaking about all kinds of gods. I'm curious to hear you speak about the way you bring different kind of gods into your work.
well, I have two kind of gods in my
I
poetry,
know.
because are the
Only two?
mythical gods. Because my father was a Greek, then I grew up with the Greek gods, and also as a Mexican, I was surrounded by Mexican gods that were very different of the Christian ones, because
Yeah,
after looking for gods, sometimes the Mexicans had a secret double meaning, that were the gods of human sacrifice. The gods of the Christian tradition were benevolent, were the good, and the Mexicans were in a way terrorific. Then sometimes I said, what is that? That I really can explain myself, and I felt myself an orphan before these Mexican gods that were terrific. And still
mm,
now, after many years, I was writing about this, these gods, with the presence of these gods. I still don't understand them, because they
mm,
were gods of human sacrifice. then it's very difficult.
I wonder if you could read "We Are Children of Cruel Gods." It's
Yes.
on page 40 in the
Oh.
book.
Somos hijos de dioses crueles. Somos hijos de dioses crueles. De nada sirve ver sus pirámides derruidas. Aún no se desvanece la sangre en sus altares. Aún sus manos asfixian nuestros sueños. Su imagen está grabada en la piedra. Sus espectros andan en nuestras ciudades, vestidos de sicarios. Al fondo de la pesadilla nos aguardan con sus puñales negros. Aunque se vayan de esta tierra a otra tierra, volveremos a procrearlos. Ellos volverán a emerger de nuestro adentro, atroces, despiadados, llevando nuestro rostro. Somos padres de dioses crueles. This is my perception of the Mexican gods, that I am living among this kind of dioses crueles, and it's like strange. But you go to the temples of the Mexican gods, and you feel that the presence of death always. They are not good dogs,
Yeah,
gods that you can say, "Oh, I trust my spirit to them." You don't know
you
what
don't
is
trust.
behind them because it's death always. They it took years to me in my adult life to understand this kind of gods, or trying to understand this kind of gods, because I had the Greek gods that were human, and also the Christian gods that I don't need to explain you the Christian god, but this kind of Mexican gods, they were like enigmatic, and they are just I can see in the face of the actual Mexicans that
Yeah,
they were very comfortable with this kind of in the daily
yeah,
life when there are crimes, etc. And there was like normal for many
yeah.
people in Mexico, like but they had the seal, the presence of this kind of gods.
The
Still now,
poem,
yes,
the poem is titled "We Are Children of Cruel Gods," and the final line is "We are parents of cruel gods."
yes,
And what an interesting thing. I was a bit surprised when you said that it was autobiographical, because partly I found this as I read it, not knowing that it might have felt to be autobiographical for you. I found myself thinking that it was a meditation on human cruelty, not
yes,
located in one particular country, but
yes,
located in the human experience of
yes.
of how the gods that we create reflect our own cruelty, rather than
Yes.
we are subject to the cruelty of gods.
I have spent my life really trying to my father was a Greek, my mother a Mexican, but I spent my life trying to explain myself the kind of cult to death of
Mm,
Mexicans, because
mm,
sometimes it's not rhetorical, it's real.
mm. Your poetry is very aware of the political realities around the world, though. Your poetry has an urgency to it at times in the way that you describe politics globally,
Yes.
not just in
Yeah.
one country. Um, has being the child of two cultures, Mexico and Greece, helped you in that tension?
Yes, what has been this kind of presence? Because since I was a child in a small village, sometimes you saw uh, people in the street killed, and
Mm,
in a bloody way. Then and also you saw the transformation of a Mexican that was friendly, human, suddenly becoming a very different with a very different face, and
mm.
becoming a killer. Then you feel like this double face of the Mexicans, and I try to be sincere with myself in my perception of the Mexicans.
Could you tell us about the zone of silence?
Yes.
Self-portrait in the zone of silence. What is the zone of silence for you? It's a
Well,
poem in the book, but it's also the full title.
yes, it's a geographical place in Mexico. In the north of Mexico, there's a place in the desert called Zone of Silence that I say that is mute to sounds, and it's like an kind of spatial silence, And I visit these zones of China many times, and I felt always the same mystery, because you are in geographical, you are walking in a landscape, but suddenly you feel the night or the horizon, that's a strange landscape, and it's like it's supernatural. I became, I have to accept this kind of alterations in the landscape, the ordinary landscape, that you see the road, you see the trees, you see the people, but suddenly there is something strange and it's special. And I visit these places and trying to find the meaning, and I didn't, I couldn't, because you have to accept that there are places in the planet, in our land, Earth, that are special.
Yeah.
That they come to the space, and it's with this the night, the light, etc. And Mexico has this kind of places that they are strange.
Homero Aridjis, you had said that your earlier poems were poems of love, and
Yes,
early in this book, there's a poem about being like a dog, and
yes,
it's a love poem, and
yes,
it seems to me that it combines your, you know, your interest in love poetry with your interest in the natural world. I wonder if you
yes.
could read it. It's on page 10. Read it in Spanish and English.
Como un perro, como un perro, siempre a los pies de alguien. Como un perro, caminaré contigo bajo el sol y el viento. Cuando estés vieja, ciega y fea, hurraré en los basureros de la vida por ti. Estar echado a tus pies como una sombra, como un perro.
Yeah.
Like a dog, always at someone's feet. Like a dog, I'll walk with you through sun and wind. When you are old, blind, and ugly, I will nose through the garbage bins of life for you. I will be stretched at your feet like a shadow, like a dog. This is a love poem for me. Yeah.
You're laughing, Omero. I'm curious about your relationship with this poem.
Yes, it's very. For me, it's full of sense of humor.
Mm,
It's like this kind of really passionate
mm.
poem.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is. Nose through the garbage bins of life for you.
yes,
It's such an interesting phrase about the lengths. I mean, it's funny, it's
yes,
humorous, but it also shows complete devotion.
exactly. Yes,
Mm,
especially also, I will be stretched at your feet like a shadow.
mm,
It's always like this kind of attachment.
mm.
Yes, to
Como un
the
sombra,
como una
the
sombra.
attachment.
Yes, como una sombra, como un perro.
Mm,
That's very, yes.
mm. What is it that draws your attention about the loyalty of a dog, the dedication of a dog?
Because I grew up with dogs always. I had a dog when I was a child and along my life. Then I felt the presence of dogs as loyalty, but also
Mm,
like a shadow of ourselves. Then it's a very vivid experience to say it like a dog, like a shadow. It's,
mm,
because I felt this the dogs when I see the love. It's like
mhm,
you are
mm,
very attached to someone. You
mm.
can say it like a dog, like a child.
George McWhirter has won this prize for translating your work into English. I'm curious about what it is. What else you've spoken about that the translation of these poems into English gives your poetry a second life. But are there other things that it gives it too? Something other than a second life. What else has the Griffin Prize given to
Well,
your poetry
I
and
think
given to your interests?
I felt the George translations very close to me, because
Mm,
has been a friend since many years ago, and it's very special relationship. And I felt George man or as a man, as a poet, as very close. I is like can say a friend who doesn't need translation. Yes,
Well, on that note, Homero Aridjis,
yes.
it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Congratulations to George McWhirter, and congratulations to you on the winning of the English translation of Self-Portrait in the Zone of Silence at the 2024 Griffin
Thank
Poetry
you so
Prize.
much, and I am very happy because many people like you can understand this kind of poetry that is a little different. Es very vivid, muy vivida, poesía muy vivida, very live. Yes. Thank you so much to you.
Thank you.
Yes.